So the beverage section of the grocery store is a pretty confusing section because it's in the middle aisles and there are endless sea of juices and sodas and bottled waters that are there. And so I try to bring a little bit of clarity to, what are the three beverages that are unquestionably healthy for you. There's no real controversy of them. All right. Because other drinks like juices and sodas, lots of controversy, lots of data. But the three things I call the holy trinity of beverages are water. Okay. Water actually is critical for hydration, critical to maintain our health defenses, critical for our metabolism. You need water in the system. Okay. And drinking water is something that is very natural and important to us. And when you drink cool water, you activate these temperature gauges in our stomach that are triggering our metabolism to kind of warm up the water in our stomach so we don't cool our core body temperature. So there's even metabolic benefits to drinking water. Water is also satiating. So when you actually drink water with a meal, you're naturally stretching out your stomach a little bit. And rather than actually having food in there, that water stretch actually basically slows down your appetite, slows down your hunger as well, which also helps to contribute to preventing you from overeating as well. So water is really good for you. There's no, it's a human right to drink water. We have to drink water. It's really great. Footnote to that. And this is actually something that I think really deserves careful research, more careful research is, bottled water, which is so commonly consumed, probably will have microplastics in it. Almost certainly does. And, even though the research hasn't clearly nailed what the harm of microplastics are, I would say it's probably not so good for you. We can find it like attached to a red blood cell circulating in our blood. That freaks me out actually to think about that. So if you can drink water, if you can drink water from a source other than bottled water, it's probably preferable.
Yeah, but get a filter at home.
Get a filter at home.
There's a great quote that a friend said years ago, an acquaintance said years ago. He said, either you get a filter or you become the filter.
That's actually really true. And our kidney's going to be the filter and our bloodstream is going to become the filter. Yeah. You don't want to be,
you don't want all that
accumulating these microplastics. But the water is really, really a good beverage. Second is tea. We talked a little bit about green tea, as being beneficial to you. Tea is the second most popular beverage in the world after drinking water. So we're talking about something that a lot of people have a lot of experience with. But what I point out in my book is not just green tea. It's different kinds of green tea. Matcha tea is actually good for you. Oolong tea, which is slightly fermented green tea, also has metabolic benefits, also has polyphenols. And then for green tea, if you have matcha, which you find in a ceremonial tea, you find in a Japanese restaurant, it's bright green tea. It's kind of opaque because it's actually made with powder. And it's the entire tea leaf that's powdered. A lot of people don't realize this, but matcha is super packed with polyphenols. You know why? Matcha is grown in a very particular way. 28 days before they pick the tea leaf to make matcha, they put it under shade. They basically cover it with a canopy, and the shade is there. So the tea, in response to the tea leaf, tea plant, in response to shade, actually wants to make more polyphenols. So they make anywhere from 30 to 300 times more polyphenols under the shade. All right. And then what happens when you pick the leaf, you cut off the stem, and then they dry and powder the entire leaf. And so that's why you have so much more polyphenol.
It's like a stress response to not having enough sun.
First, it's a stress response to the plant, but then you get more, rather than having it in a tea bag or loose tea leaves, you actually powder the entire leaf. So you're getting the entire leaf, including all the polyphenols. So you drink all the polyphenols, which is why you get 30 to 300 times more than just dunking a tea bag. You also get the dietary fiber, good for your gut microbiome. So matcha tea actually is quite amazing. Actually done a study to show that matcha tea extracts can kill breast cancer stem cells.
Wow.
I'm always amazed by that because, look, as somebody who's been involved with biotech development and cancer treatment development, finding something that could kill stem cells, cancer stem cells, like breast cancer stem cells, which is what makes cancers come back, is a holy grail. We don't have a drug for it, but here, matcha tea actually been shown in the lab to actually be able to do that. To me is actually really jaw-dropping. Then going down into even more fermented tea, because traditionally, again, this idea that in our wellness community, we wind up having all these mantras, must drink green tea and oxidized fermented tea is no good. Turns out that's not true. The science is showing that oolong tea, which is slightly fermented, also good for your metabolism. You can lose your waist, you can shrink your waist size, your waist circumference, lose body fat. And then even perhaps more surprising, if you take the extreme of fermented smoky dark teas, there's a tea that I write about called pu'er tea, P-U''ERH. One of your favorites, right? Yeah. One of mine as well. This comes from a village of Pu'er that back thousands of years actually traded tea on the Silk Road. So they smoked the tea, they fermented it so it would actually survive the tea journey. And it turns out research has been done to show that Pu'er tea lights up your brown fat, burns up, triggers your excess fat burning by burning the cells, decreases your stem cells from making more fat, and fats, visceral fat as well. Quite remarkable that this fermented tea that's supposedly, fermented, can't be good, doesn't have any of the polyphenol stuff, wrong. And on top of that, they've actually discovered just a few years ago that there is this tradition, 1,000-year-old tradition of making pu'er tea. There's even a bacteria, a probiotic that actually the bacteria is grown in the way that it's fermented. In fact, they call it pu'ercillus, like a bacillus that actually grows in pu'er tea. So this is actually a probiotic tea, which to me is remarkable. And not only does it improve gut health, it's good for your metabolism as well. So it fires up your brown fat. So again, tea is the second part of the Holy Trinity. The third, which I always drink, and you asked me what did I want if I was coming in to do this podcast with you, and I requested a cup of coffee. Coffee has chlorogenic acid and many other polyphenols, but the chlorogenic acid not only boosts your health defenses, but it also triggers your metabolism and it stimulates your metabolism from going as well. A little bit of the caffeine, which I'm able to tolerate. Not everybody can tolerate caffeine, but I'm able to tolerate the caffeine. Caffeine also stimulates not only your kind of like your brain, but also stimulates your metabolism as well. And I'm not encouraging people to go after caffeine. I'm just saying that coffee is one of the third of the Holy Trinity: coffee, tea, and water that actually is really, really healthy.
The beautiful thing about the way you present it is like pu'er, one of my favorite teas. I drank it so much during college.
Yeah.
Like I would drink it all the time. And then I had a little bit of a gap. And then I'm thinking recently, I'm like, you know what? It's probably been a year or two since I've had it. Like when you know the information, it's another reminder of like, oh, this thing that I used to enjoy or that I've heard of or that I heard somebody else having, like, wow, like that's exciting for me. And you include it back into your routine. And all this culminates together. And it really goes into this last principle that you talk about in the 10 principles, which is live to eat, right? The joy of searching out, being a food hunter, forager in our modern world, and really leaning into the idea of not being fear-based around food, but actually, I'll let you set it up. Sometimes we hear this phrase, like people say, oh, do you eat to live or do you live to eat? And almost like live to eat has a demeaning tone that people give it in that capacity. Talk about how you're representing it to the audience.
Yeah, well, in my book, one of the things that I really try to, and I hope the readers get this, convey is that we don't need to fear our food. The very foods that taste great can be actually good for us if we're mindful about how we eat it and when we eat it and all that kind of other stuff, and to find good combinations of it, and that these are connected to our old traditions. And that's really how I really became very mindful of this whole idea of living to eat. So I did a gap year before I went to medical school to become a doctor. I was a biochemist in college, and I was very enamored by history, and I was always interested in the Mediterranean because when I studied, I took a very influential course called the Renaissance History of Man. And that course fascinated me because it was really talking about that inflection point between the Dark Ages, the Middle Ages, and the Renaissance, sort of the Enlightenment, and all the incredible arts and sciences and literature explosion of culture that occurred during the Renaissance. Right. And I realized something that was really amazing, which is that at any point, like it didn't happen overnight. It wasn't like, one day it was in a dark room. It's called the Middle Ages. And then one day somebody clicked on a light switch and, it's a Renaissance. No, this actually took place over hundreds of years that this evolution actually occurred. And I realized that there was something really valuable about this idea of of growing to higher light, a stage of enlightenment that occurs over time. I really wanted to see where this occurred, which happened to be in the Mediterranean that we were studying in Italy and Greece. So I really wanted to get over there to study it. And then I also realized that the food traditions also, as part of my study, changed dramatically between the Middle Ages, where people are just like, cooking, those gigantic, Bronto burgers over a fire, to really beginning to understand how ingredients melded together. The simmering and the cooking and the stewing, like these were not medieval age. You did have cavemen were doing that, but really sort of during the Middle Age, that's when the modern Asian and Mediterranean actually cooking techniques came into being. So I wanted to see this. So before I went to medical school, I did a gap year. And I went to Italy. I kind of embedded myself, so to speak. And I was, I lived with a family, and I was there explicitly to study the link between food and culture and health. I wanted to see what it was like over there in Italy and Greece. I traveled all around Italy. And I actually also did some cooking for the families I was living with. In Greece, I went to a monastery. I literally volunteered to be a cook in the monastery one day because the abbot announced that the chef monk was sick, had the flu, and they needed volunteers, and who knew how to cook. And so I raised my hand, and off I went. In there, we were stirring a ginormous pot of beans with a canoe paddle, literally, and cooking for the entire monastery. This was like cooking Easter feast. And, and to me, that experience burned into my brain while I was living there, that people really enjoyed their food. They knew about their food. They talked about their food. They looked forward to their food. So, if you go to Mediterranean, anyone, if you have a friend in Italy or in Greece and they took you out to a meal or cooked a meal for you, while you sat down with your meal, they would be talking about their food. Italians talk about what they're eating as they're eating it, and they talk about the season it is and how to prepare it and different nuances about it. People are passionate about their food. Same thing in Asia, I would imagine the same thing as in India. People take the time to prepare their food, and when they serve it, that's what people talk about. They talk about their food, and they really, really relish it and enjoy it. And they look forward to their next meal. I think, to me, I learned that was the antithesis of what I came back to when I went to medical school, where we were so rushed. We were so busy. We didn't have time to eat. And so when you sat down, it was really just to pile in some sustenance and to get to the next thing. And that, to me, was, I really wanted to live to eat as opposed to just eat to live, to pile in some calories so I can keep going. I think I've really lived my life that way, and what I hope for people who read my book is that they'll really see from the way that I write about food that it's something that I enjoy, it's passionate, and that it's something that you can really look forward to. Like when I was writing some of the things that I wrote, I wrote part of this book, by the way, in the Mediterranean. I went back, I was doing some research in places, and I finished my book actually in Greece. I was on a Greek island, and I went to a little writing cave, and the food that I would eat, like I would write about afterwards, and it would make my mouth water to write about the food I just ate all over again. So, I hope readers really get this idea. Like, please don't fear your food. Love your food. And it's just so amazing that we're so fortunate, actually, to be able to, benefit from societies and histories and cultures that have actually figured out a lot of stuff for us. And now what's cool is that science is bringing us really to the cutting edge, that forefront, where we begin to understand why the things that taste so great are actually so great. This is a really provocative study of kiwi fruit. 2 kiwi fruits a day times 4 days, and you measure the stool in healthy subjects from every single day, and you can see that just having 2 kiwi fruits in the first 24 hours changes the bacteria that you can measure in the stool by improving the good bacteria as quickly as the first day. And over 4 days, you can increase another good bacteria as well. So these changes can be really quick. And harmful foods can actually similarly change the makeup very quickly. We don't measure this routinely in the clinic, but in the future we will. There are other foods that actually contain bacteria. Yogurt is the best example of this, but there are other fermented foods, whether it's poutsai, kimchi, or a sauerkraut. And these all actually are exposed to the air. Healthy bacteria grow on them. We eat them. And over the course of hundreds of years, cultures have realized that this is actually something that can be beneficial to us. And now we're beginning to dive down deeply and understand why. Here are some foods that are beneficial to the microbiome. Finally, I want to just close by saying the microbiome is connected to the immune system, which we know is important because we now realize that about 70% of our immune systems actually wrap like a jelly roll inside our intestines, and the bacteria talks to our immune system. Former U.S. President Jimmy Carter had melanoma that spread to his liver and his brain, and he retired from public life thinking that he was not going to survive. He received one of the biggest breakthroughs in medicine today, which is an immunotherapy that doesn't kill the cancer directly, but uncloaks the cancer that's been hiding from the immune system to allow a 90-year-old person's immune system to find the tumor as a health defense and to wipe it out. Now, this is the type of response that he got before treatment and after treatment. This is a CT scan of the brain. You can see tumor versus no tumor. And we do see this in melanoma, for example, but less than 20% of the people actually respond. So this is very frustrating, the difference between life and death, response and no response. It's one of the big mysteries today. And one of the things that's really remarkable is we're beginning to understand that the foods we eat may impact our immune system through the microbiome. And this is actually a colleague of mine, Laurence Zipvogel in Paris at the Institut Gustave Roussy, found that in 200 consecutive patients treated with immunotherapy, those patients who responded had one bacteria that the ones who didn't respond did not have in their stool. And that's a bacteria called Akkermansia muciniphila, and you can't eat that as a probiotic. You can only eat foods that cause your gut to secrete the mucus that it likes to grow in. And this is now changing the way that we think about how cancer patients are fed, because how many cancer patients that you know might be getting an antibiotic unknowingly and wiping out this bacteria that could make the difference between whether they respond or don't respond. This is also beginning to change this. And this is how it works. Pomegranate, it's got a lagotannin, it's bioactive. It causes the gut to secrete the mucus. The bacteria Akkermansia grows. It lights up the immune system. So now you have more fortified, more active immune system. Now you hang a bag of immunotherapy, and then cancer immunotherapy will then work on and allow the activated immune cells to go find that cancer. This is oversimplified, but this is what we believe works. And it's very personal to me as I figured this out, because my mother, who was in her 80s, was diagnosed with endometrial cancer, cancer of the lining of the uterus that spread. And she was told by her doctors there was no chance to survive, and at her age, chemotherapy might be worse than the disease itself, and that she should actually just go undergo palliative care. So we actually took the tumor, did the deep dive, found the smoking guns for immune therapy. We then altered her diet, made sure she had the Akkermansia, and after 3 treatments, 9 weeks, we had a complete response, never had chemotherapy. She was actually able to be completely saved, and this is her today, completely well with no sign of cancer. So again, this is not a simple case, but a complicated way that we're beginning to think things. And then finally, let me just tell you, broccoli sprouts also boost the immune system. And this is a study of 29 volunteers who were getting the flu vaccine through a nasal spray. And it found that if they gave them 2 cups of broccoli sprout shake as a smoothie a day, combined with the nose spray, they had a 22 times increase in their immune response to the flu vaccine compared to people who didn't have it. So what I've actually showed you is not just food as medicine, but foods and medicine, where what's happening is that the technology that nature laced into food is meeting the technology.